All right, everybody, we'll go ahead and get started here. Again, welcome to the fall MIP Lunch and Learn. This is Luke Lothamer. On the screen's a little bit about myself. Many of you might know me, but in case you don't, been working with MIP for quite some time now, and we'll start out with some introductions and get started into the main agenda. So if you're having any issues today, whether it be audio or video, please reach out to Leah Peters. Her number is there on the screen. If you have not attended a Lunch and Learn in the past, there is a way you can submit questions. That is going to be via the chat box that pops up for the go-to panel. And we don't typically open the phone lines, but we do occasionally get through the questions. I'll pause here and there, and we'll try to answer those during the webinar. If there are any questions that we don't get to, I'll be sure to answer those after the fact and follow up via email. Today's agenda, we're going to start with the intros and then jump right into MIP Performance. I'm planning to show you how you can perform your own system checkup. From there, we're going to get into budgets. I know many people are probably either in the middle of budget season or they're coming up on for the 2026 budget, depending on when your fiscal year might be. And then we're going to round out the hour today with RAMP. And RAMP is a third-party add-on, and we'll tell you all about how that can make your life a little bit easier along with MIP. Here at DWD, the MIP team is made up of myself and Adam Westgertis. Many of you have probably worked with one or both of us in the past. We're always here to help with any MIP questions or anything you might want to know or need help with. So if you need anything, feel free to reach out to one of us via email or give us a call at the phone numbers there at the bottom of the slide. For those of you who aren't familiar with DWD, we are a division of the CPA firm Doolin, Ward & DeWalt, established in 1939, located in Northeast Indiana, Fort Wayne, and we are comprised of right around 90 staff. The technology group in particular, we're made up of mostly software consultants and network engineers. A few of our software consultants are also CPAs, and we have been nominated to the Accounting Today's Top 100 Bars, as well as Bob Scott's nomination for Top 100 Bars as well. We do offer other software solutions in addition to MIP, so you're going to notice a lot of these on the slide here. Start with Sage. So we do consider ourselves a Sage shop, but we do help with MIP as well. So you're going to see some of those you may be familiar with. You may have heard of Sage 50, which used to be known as Peachtree, Sage 100, and then the new one there is Sage Intacct. And the past few Lunch and Learns, I've highlighted Sage Intacct, and I'm going to jump into that here just briefly as we go through introductions. And so if you're not familiar with Sage Intacct, the reason I bring it up is we've seen a lot of interest in this with our MIP client base. It's a natural transition from MIP to Sage Intacct. Whether you're growing, you need to do more advanced, complex things within the software that maybe MIP can't handle. Few of the things I'm going to highlight here related to Sage Intacct. When you log in, it is a cloud-based solution. If you're in the MIP cloud, you log in via your web browser. Same concept here. So you would input your company ID, user credentials, and log in. From there, you come to a screen here, and I'm showing you what a journal entry looks like within Sage Intacct, but I'll kind of show off the menu options here. You have a plethora of modules that you can use or have them at your disposal here. And so really anything that you have in MIP today, there is an option in Sage Intacct. The other beauty of Sage Intacct is it uses a table-driven chart of accounts. So in MIP, if you're used to entering an AP invoice or a journal entry, and you're used to having these different columns here, these names are just the names that are in my demo environment, but similar to MIP, you could change these similar to the segments Intacct calls these dimensions, and then you'll see your options, and you would code your entry accordingly, just like you do in MIP today. One other great thing about Sage Intacct is their dashboards and reporting. This is just an example here on my screen. You can have role-based. You can see here at the top, mine is related to CFO. You could have personalized ones where when you log in, it pops up your dashboard, and from there you can look at reports, these charts and graphs, all this necessary information for your day-to-day activities. You can click into any one of these, so if you wanted to drill down into a value, it's going to take you into the very granular detail of that. So lots of good things. We're seeing tons of interest in Sage Intacct right now, so if anybody ever wants to know a little bit more or see a free demo of the software, reach out to Adam or myself and we can certainly get that scheduled. Jumping back to our slide deck here, we've got a few more housekeeping items. Just to kind of continue on with DWD and who we are, we do also offer network services. So if you're ever in the need for a managed IT security plan, data backup services, Microsoft Office 365, or managed IT services, we're happy to help you out with any of those areas. Or if you're not sure and you just know that it's network related, reach out to Adam or myself and we can certainly help get you in contact with the right person. All right, one more slide here. The visual over here is something that the accounting profession is dealing with right now and probably for the foreseeable future. So many of our organizations that we work with are dealing with one, two, or maybe even all three of these. And that could start at any one. So if you have workers, employees, team members who are retiring, you have to find somebody to replace them, right? And their workload. That then continues into what a talent shortage. We don't have enough accountants filling those roles or getting the education to become accountants, and therefore you're getting that talent shortage. And with more opportunities out there, there's potential for high turnover. So maybe someone's looking to move up into a better position or higher paying position. That then turns into high turnover. So those three things are areas that we see the accounting profession continuing to deal with. And the reason I mention it is we are offering client advisory services. And so this could be a temporary or a permanent solution to these issues or changing of times within the accounting industry. So DWD is very familiar with the software, MIP, and all those Sage ones that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. Like I mentioned, temporary or permanent fix to these issues for you. If you do have retirements that come up or someone leaves your organization unexpectedly and there's a gap where you're not sure how you're going to fill those accounting tasks that need to be completed, reach out to Adam or myself and we'd be happy to have a conversation with you, see how we can help. Again, the temporary one is we jump in for a month, 2 months, however long it takes for you to fill that position or positions, or even a permanent fix where we take over certain things that you want us to do on a monthly basis. And some organizations consider that outsourced accounting. Really, it's a combination. So what we see client advisory services as, it's a way to leverage technology and do more with less. So again, if you ever want to have a conversation about this, schedule a free needs assessment today, and we'd be happy to discuss further. All right, without further ado, let's jump right into the MIP Performance, and I'll show you how to perform your own system checkup. So many of you have probably had a system review completed by us in the past. Some of you are on support plans, and we do this annually with you. But I'll take you through some of the things that we look for when we do those system reviews. So I've highlighted some of these that I've handpicked in the slide deck so you can kind of follow along. I can't promise you that I'll go in order. I may jump around here and there, but we're going to start out with your chart of account structure. So many of you on the call here today, you're familiar with the classic interface. Some of you may use the modern, but I'm going to focus here in classic, and we'll kind of cover all of these areas. So your chart of account structure can be found, if you have access to this, it can be found organization information here. And then if we look at our tabs at the top, we're going to select segments. And these are your segments of your organization. Now, my demo environment here has these 6. Yours may look similar, but not quite identical. You may have some futures in here at the bottom where you've carved out some segments that maybe if you want to use in the future, they are available to you. That's all normal. But what I want to focus on here is if you all look at your chart of account structure, are you able to say, yes, we use all of these today? Everything is working great and no changes are needed. If that's the case, no further action. But if you say, well, we actually don't use department. I came on to the organization, started using MIP, don't really know what that has to do with our organization. That might be a question for us to talk further and see, well, what could that be used for? You can always rename these. So like, let's say your organization used to use department, but now you want to use it for a different purpose. You could change this name and then create new codes for that. So again, the whole exercise here is to have you review your segments and see if they are all still applicable. The other thing too is to keep in mind, if you look at the lengths, 3, 5, 5, and so forth, those are hard-coded when you created your MIP database. So if you're running out of codes or space for future codes, the changing of the length is not easily updated, but it can be done. So that would be another reason to have a conversation with us if it seems like you're running into issues with new codes. Okay. So that's one area we would begin a system review on. Next would be related to your chart of accounts or segments, and I'm going to go to your accounting setup here and chart of accounts. So within here, many of you are probably familiar with it. This is going to list out all of your codes. One thing I always look for, and you can see in my database, in the status column here, it shows all A's. That would typically tell me that a review of your chart of accounts has not been complete, because I would probably expect there to be some inactives or discontinued at some point. And to keep a clean chart of accounts, you always want to review those codes either once a year to make sure that if there are any that you're no longer using, you mark those as inactive. And it's as simple as coming in. I'll just double click on one of these codes here and changing. Let me look here. Hang on one sec. It didn't allow me to. And let's click on that again. Okay, your status. Like I was mentioning, if there are codes, whether it be GL accounts, department codes, grants, you're no longer using them, inactive is going to keep them available in the dropdown, but if they're selected, it's going to warn the user and say, hey, are you sure you want to use this code? Discontinued is going to remove that code from all dropdowns so that it can't be selected. Full disclosure, it's not removing your data or history or anything like that. If you run reports, it's still going to show you data on that code. So no concern from an audit perspective if it's removing any activity related to that account. It's just removing it from the dropdown. So I would, again, recommend coming in here, and you could even do this too. So if you look at this listing, you can preview this to your screen. take this out to Excel. This report, again, this is showing you all of my segments along with all of the codes. But take that out to Excel, highlight the ones, or have your team highlight ones that they're no longer using, and then whoever is an admin within accounting could come out and make those inactive or discontinued. Okay. Definitely another area when we do system reviews, this isn't uncommon where it looks like mine. It just takes the time to do that little review of those accounts and making those inactive or discontinued. Another one somewhat related to that is going to be your offset account assignments and closing account assignments. If you're not really familiar with this, these are likely to have been set up early on, and then they would be set up whenever you create a new account. If you look at, let's just say AP invoices, my offset assignments, if you click this find button here, that's going to show you all of the assignments that have been set up. So if we look here, you'll want to look at your transaction type. So APC is going to be checks, API is going to be AP invoices, and you can see that whenever an account is entered in the AP invoice area, if you do an automatic offset, it's going to offset it with my AP account here. These might need to be reviewed at some point. Maybe this doesn't happen very often, but you might create a new AP account or a separate AP account for a different fund. In that case, you might want to make some updates and change your offsets. So this is a way you can do that. Same concept for closing account assignments. Some of you may have gotten a message when you run a financial after creating a new account, and it says, can't process, closing account assignments need to be created. That happens occasionally, in which case you can come out here and make sure that all of your closing assignments have been set up properly. If you click this little wand icon, you'll want to select fund or location, whatever your balancing segment is. Select that, and then you can just push all of these over. And what's going to happen is when I offset it to my net assets in this case, it's going to tell me if I have any that haven't been set up. So there's really no harm in doing this step. You want to make sure that your offset or your closing assignment is the right account. But if it finds any that haven't been set up, you will see a number here, and you want to make sure that you get those set up. Okay. All right. Jumping ahead here, I'm kind of going in line with the slides. At this point, I added a few in there that might not have been included, but one other main one that we see when we do system reviews that not many organizations do. So if you're not familiar with this, don't feel bad, because many others aren't necessarily doing this routinely either. Data integrity checks. Many of you may not even have the access to do this, so this would be an admin on your accounting team. Within the organization menu here, down to data integrity checks, I would always recommend doing these at least once a year, if not maybe a couple times a year. You just check all these boxes and click start. Usually I would recommend doing this when you're leaving for the day, let it run overnight. It really doesn't take that long, but if you're sitting here watching it spin to completion, it could take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. So if you run all these at once, it's going to then return a little window and tell you if it passed or failed. What you're looking for is if there are any failures. Usually that means that your general ledger could potentially be off from your subledgers, such as AP or AR. And we do see this from time to time. It's really not something a user could do. So it's not like one of your team members did something to cause a failure. Usually it's a blip in the connection. So if your internet went out in the middle of processing something, then that could cause issues like this. It's really kind of freak accidents that cause these data integrity failures. So if you have any of these failures come up, we can help you get those resolved. It's either usually related to a script that needs to be run, doesn't take very long, or you could have posted an entry into a closed fiscal year, and that could be throwing things off too. So again, recommend running these at least once a year to make sure you get all successes. Next up, I'll jump into the APAR area. So when we're talking vendors and customers, you could get to that either via the AP module and then the vendors down here in the gray area, or you could come up here to maintain. There's vendors, or AR, there's customers. The reason I mentioned both of these, they're kind of very similar in many ways. You're tracking those people who you are paying or those people who are paying you. So you want to do a review of these vendors similar to your chart of accounts. If there's anybody who should no longer be paid, you'll want to do that similar status update. So if we come out here and we say, we're no longer using ABC office supply, we actually started using XYZ office supply instead, you'd want to come out here and probably discontinue the vendor so that your users could no longer select ABC or see them in the drop-down. So definitely recommend doing a review of your vendor and customer listing to see if any need to be made inactive or discontinued. Same thing, you could run this report, export it to Excel, and you could pass this out to your accounting team and have them review and say, hey, have we used, maybe it's a purchasing assignment, and you say, hey, do we need to update our vendor listing or make some of these inactive or discontinued? Okay. One other area, sometimes we get duplicates in here. So someone didn't realize that the vendor already existed, so they created a new one. And some of you may be familiar with this already, but you can merge vendors into one. So if we said this vendor here, International Supplies and International Supplies Incorporated, they're the same vendor, you could, and it's sometimes finicky. So you're looking for this icon right here that seems to be grayed out, merge or rename vendor ID. If you happen to see that that is grayed out, it's not necessarily a security issue that you don't have permission. If I click new, which is going to clear out my vendor here, you'll notice that that icon becomes available. So then you could select your International Supplies, and you could say, I want to merge it with the other International Supplies. Or if it's just a matter of renaming, maybe the vendor changed names entirely and you don't want to have to create a new vendor because you want that history to still be tied to them, you do have this rename feature as well. So you would just create a new vendor ID, and comments reflect the change that's being made. Same thing applies to customers. So on the AR side, you had those organizations that were paying you. If I would always do a review to see if any need to be made inactive or discontinued, and if any need to be merged, similar to what we just did here, that can be accomplished as well. I'll pause here, see if we've got any questions, and then I can keep going on the MIP performance topic.
Luke, we do have one question. When you were talking about making segments active or inactive, one person's asking, is there an easy way to mark several segments as active at the same time?
Good question. There is not an easy way to mark many at once. So like a mass update, that's not currently possible. And again, I'm going, if you happen to be on premise still, you could write a SQL script to perform that. We used to do that. Many of you are probably on MIP Cloud now, and MIP might be able to perform that for you.
All right, and that's it for questions right now.
Okay, thanks, Sherry. All right, so I'm going to back to our main screen here, and I'm going to show you more or less tips or tricks, things to review, to think about as you're going through and doing your own checkup of your MIP system. So one area, organization preferences. This is one I highlight to see if this table has been updated during a system review. So your entry dates table, again, organization preferences. When I look in this table here, it looks a lot of the time like mine, where this column's blank, this column's blank. And so if you're not familiar with this, basically you're going to see your transaction types on the far left. So for AP invoices, we are saying in this column, we want to prohibit users from entering prior to a certain date. So usually we're in the year 2025, so we might say we don't want anybody entering anything prior to January 1st of 25. So you might just, enter that here. And that might apply all the way down. So we do commonly see that. So when people update this table and you have everything entered, again, following audits and whatnot, you don't want anybody to enter anything prior to that because you've closed out 2024. So you could use the F5 key and copy that date all the way down. So I'm hitting F5 and then at my down arrow, and you could just copy that for everything. Some organizations, if you want to get really into the weeds as far as like closing months, maybe you update this and say, okay, we're in October, we have probably closed the month of September, but there might be a need for September entries still potentially, but definitely not August. So you might update this for 9/1 so that nobody can enter anything into August. Now, if for some reason that changes and you do need to enter anything into August, it's as easy as coming out here and changing this back to August or whatever date that makes sense. All you need to know about these columns are this is meant to prohibit prior to the said date below. The warnings are going to fit in between. So like if I entered an entry, there's not really anything in between there, but let's just say I put in warn prior to 10/1. If I entered something in September, it's going to specify, hey, are you sure you want to enter it because it's prior to October 1st? Same concept over here. This has a 12/31 date, so if I entered anything with a 2026 date, right now it's just going to give me a warning message. If I want to prohibit after a certain date, such as December 31st, 2025, we want to make sure that this column reflects that. So prohibit is not going to allow any user to enter an entry after that date. So really the whole goal is to set this table up so that your users are either warned or prevented from entering prior to or after a certain date. So always recommend updating this, and some organizations call this a soft close. You're not closing the books to where they can never be entered into again, but you are closing them so users can't enter into a closed period. All right. Next, let's take a look at transaction entry. So if we come in here to AP and we start a new session, to enter test there. And what I want to focus on here is if you're using the entry default table. And so if you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's where if you start to code your entry down below here, you want some of these to pre-fill with a value. So for instance, like if I know my restriction 90, maybe 95% of the time or more is going to be unrestricted, maybe we want that to default. And if you're not sure how to do that, it's going to be this icon right here, entry defaults. Similarly, if you look at this and there's a value in there and you always wondered, well, how does that get pre-filled? It's because it's probably entered right here in one of these fields. But if you wanted to set up one or many, you could say, I want this to pre-fill with unrestricted. I want this to pre-fill with, maybe that's a bad example because it's department. But any one of these, you could have that value, and that doesn't lock it in. So when I start to code this, you'll notice 01, my restriction pre-filled with 1, and a few of these others actually did too. So the GL is going to be tied to this vendor. So if I reviewed ABC Office Supply, it's going to default to 57001, Office and Other Supplies Expense. If you wanted to help make things more efficient or maybe automate things such as the coding, the entry defaults table is a good area to explore first. And this does apply to all the transaction types. And so I'm in AP invoices currently, but if I looked at that icon for journal entries or AR invoices, it's going to be different. So it does apply for each transaction type and then also user. So if Adam were using his MIP database, his would look different than mine. And so just keep that in mind if you're instructing your team to set that up. They will have to enter those values too, not just you set it up for one person, it applies to all. All right, I'm going to jump to one more item that I'll share because it always comes up during system reviews, and then we'll move on to our next topic here. So reporting is an area that usually for organizations who have been on MIP for quite some time, you have a lot of reports. And so if we come out to my financials, and let's just look at a traditional statement of revenues and expenditures, I don't have many reports out here, but if you looked at your organizations, and I look at many during system reviews, it's a long list, and it could range from having the same report with different people's names on it, or maybe they have board RE with 2024, 2023, 2022, and on. The great thing about MIP is you don't have to have all of that. So I get if Adam and Luke want to have their separate reports, that's fine, but adding a year, or maybe there are people's names in the drop-down that are no longer with the organization, I would always recommend cleaning those up, just removing them if they're not being used. So you could do this a couple of different ways. If you had one report you know you want to remove, you could select it and easily hit the delete button at the bottom. And then if it's many reports, you could click this find button here at the bottom, and you can highlight multiple, click the red X at the top, and that'll delete them. This topic here, the pushing of the delete button, it never fails. People are scared to do it. What I would recommend, if you could get your list of reports, so whether you print this list to Excel, whatever it may be, review your list and find the ones that you use on a routine basis. Maybe keep track of how often you run them, and just see the ones that you don't run or haven't ever run, and I would clean your list up. Sometimes it's very hard for the organizations I work with to pick through here and find the reports they want to run. An alternative would be, if you don't want to clean up the list because you're scared that you might delete something and find out you really needed it, you can use the process manager. And this is probably the most underutilized area within MIP. And my example over here is not great either. Many of yours might look similar to this. So if I'm hovering over the process manager and my favorites folder, you can add reports to this so that you know the ones that you run on a regular basis. it's as easy as creating a new folder. Let's just call this one reports. And then these tabs here at the bottom, this middle one's going to be reports related. And what I'll mention is if you look at the folders and options here, it's going to be related to the module that I'm currently looking at. So this is AP related. That's why we see AP analysis, transaction reports, and so on. If I look at my report manager, you'll notice that changed. So we have all of my financial options here. So if I wanted to add a statement of revenues and expenditures, I would go ahead and expand that. And then there's my board RE that I had pulled up just a minute ago. You can right click and you can say add to favorites. You can even rename it because the way it shows up is that's the type of report it is, statement of revenues and expenditures. Board RE is the name. If I want to rename it and just call it board RE for what I'm used to, you can do that. And then it's as easy as right clicking on it and click edit. And it's going to pull up the screen where you can change the dates, you can change the filters, the content, and all of that. Yep, just like so. Make your changes and then preview it. You'll notice this didn't drop into my reports folder, but you can simply drag and drop it. And then when you expand it, there's the reports. So again, I mentioned that. If you need to utilize that instead of deleting or cleaning up your report listing. All right, we're going to move on to budgets. Not going to spend a whole lot of time there, but I know budget season is in full effect for many organizations right now. So we'll kind of touch on that, and then we'll round out the day with RAMP. So going to budgeting, many of you may be familiar with the worksheets, but in case you're not, we're going to come to the budgeting module and then budget worksheet. And this is how I would recommend entering your budget. It's very clean and it keeps everything in a good, usable format. So when we come out here, if you're not familiar, you can see the ones that you've processed in previous years. If you're ready to input your new, let's just say FY 2026, you'll create a new name that doesn't exist currently, and it's going to bring up your budget worksheet wizard. From here, you can kind of follow along in my screenshots of what needs to be completed. Your versions is one area that I mentioned in my slide deck. You can have as many versions as needed. So maybe you have an operating version or a board approved version that doesn't get changed throughout the year. And then maybe you have an in-house or internal budget that you change and modify as the year goes on. So that's kind of the concept with the version. You could have multiple and then insert whichever one into your reports as you see fit. So we'll go ahead and select operating in our case here. Our worksheet type is important, and I'll kind of get to the other option here in just a minute, but we're going to select new worksheet. And then our dates, in my case, is fine, but if you had a 7/1 fiscal year, you'd update that. And then based on the number of periods, okay, it's going to give me an error message, but it's going to automatically update the ending date. So don't have to worry about that. Let me go back to a calendar year. All right, and then you do have the option to select monthly, quarterly, or yearly. Most commonly, we see monthly used. All right, it's just giving me a warning message. You do have the ability to add comparative columns. So if you wanted to see in one column what your actuals are for the prior year or the prior year budget, you can add that as a separate column. That's what this area is used for. And then you're going to select the dimension or the segments that you want to budget at. Don't see all of these checked very often, but check the ones that matter to you. Maybe you need fund, grant, and GL, in which case I'll then click next. And then if you budget at the revenue and expense level, we'll select this third option. If you only wanted to do expenses, you do have that available. And then the activity basis down here is very important. So if you wanted to have just a blank budget where you come in and paste the values from an Excel spreadsheet, you do have that option as blank. Or if you want MIP to do some of the budget work for you and populate values in which you review and then maybe change, the accounts with activity is going to be the option for you. So I'm going to go ahead and click next here. You do have the ability to filter. So if you wanted to do a separate worksheet for a unique fund, for a unique grant, you could add that over here and say, I'm going to budget the operating fund on this worksheet. More common than not, we just see everyone budget one large worksheet, but you do have the ability to do many worksheets and then all of those roll up for reporting purposes. And then we get to our calculation basis. So if you wanted to have your budget based on last year actuals, that's this option. If you want to have it on budget, you can select this and then which version you want to use. I'm going to select actual. And then the calculation method, another important area here, if you just want to have it be an average and have it spread evenly over 12 months, that's one option. Or if you wanted it to have a period matching effect where maybe you have some months that are higher than others, it's going to look at actuals and budget accordingly based on that. So let's go ahead and select that option. Or I should say, the third option would be it gives you the account combinations, but a zero budget. So you have the coding on the left side of the worksheet, and then your users or whoever it is that's filling in your budget come in and enter those values without knowing what the actual or budget was last year. Okay, when we select a calculation method, and in this case actuals, we have to define what is our starting date we want to use. So if it's 1/1/25, we'll go ahead and use that. If it's a prior year because this year's not done currently, you could change it backwards if need be. All right, so we can see that we have 165 rows that are going to populate that had actuals for that prior year. So when we'll click Finish Save, it's going to build out this budget for me. And once it's complete here, we'll take a look at it. So like I mentioned, it kind of does the legwork for you based on what selections we've made. We have our funds, our grants, our GLs, and we have values based on last year's actuals. If you wanted to update, you just come in and you update the value accordingly. If you said, for this row, I know it's going to be 5,000 spread evenly, you can come out here and simply do that. And you'll notice it's going to spread that budget over the 12 months. You could even have a spreadsheet exported and then update it, copy and paste to bring those values back in. So you do have a lot of flexibility, and depending on your budget process today, maybe this doesn't make sense because you need other grant managers, fund managers to do their part and then bring it in. Maybe it's better for you to have it in spreadsheets and just go the copy paste route. We do see that routinely as well. One final item I want to get to on the budget side of things is if your budget is complete and you're in the middle of the year and you need to make a revision. If you're not familiar how to do that, I would lean towards going the worksheet route. So if we come out and we undo here, actually let's go ahead and save that one. Let's say same concept. I would say use a new name. So let's just do FY 2026 Rev 1. And when we hit tab, you'll want to make sure you select the same version you used that you want to update. So I used operating for mine. I'm going to revise the operating. It's very confusing sometimes because they do have a revised version here. but you always want to select the version that you want to update. And right here is where you want to make the selection of revisions worksheet. And so when we do that, and I'm going to change this back to 2025 because I still might not get any options. Okay, I do have some. So what I want to show you here is when it creates it, it looks a little different than what we saw before, but the important part is the columns for your months. So if you want to make changes in the middle of the year for a specific month, you can either say, I want it to increase by, let's just say 50, and then it updates the revised number, or you can update the total to say, I know that's going to be 250, and then it updates the adjustment that needs to take place. So when you save this and you transfer this revision worksheet, it's going to bring over the adjustment itself. So it doesn't replace your existing one per se, but it does update it to whatever values you change. It's not creating a whole new budget. It's just looking at the changes you make here and doing an entry accordingly. So that's how you'll complete a revision worksheet. If you do have further questions related to budgeting, or you want to talk through anything related to your budget process, we're always here to help you out and see what makes sense. I'll pause here briefly to see if there's any questions. Otherwise, we will move on to RAMP.
Luke, we did have one question. Before you were talking about budgeting, you were showing them how they could enter dates that would prohibit entering transactions prior to or after a certain date.
Mm-hmm.
We had one question that said, will this update the memorized documents to have the dates be the current year?
No, this has no control over memorized entries. Basically, if you tried to relate the two, if you had any memorized entries trying to post into a prohibited date, it's just going to say that this table needs to be updated.
All right, that's it for questions.
Okay. All right. For our next topic, we'll jump into RAMP, and I'm going to pass it over to Adam at this point. I can see your screen, Adam.
Okay. Well, I see a lot of familiar names, some unfamiliar names. I work alongside with Luke here at DWD, and we've had quite a bit of interest in a buzzword, AP automation, and often organizations are having trouble with kind of their credit card transactions, collecting receipts. It slows down month end. And so we've come to like a product called RAMP here. We are certified on it, implement it, support it, and can work with MIP and other accounting solutions. So it's quite a bit more modern in comparison to MIP and other solutions that are out there, but has a lot of workflow capabilities, artificial intelligence, and things kind of baked in. And so where this kind of fits into place is it covers basically anything outside of payroll spending. So payroll would still stand alone, but maybe you've got credit card transactions or bank accounts that you're processing things. Maybe there are people that are trying to track reimbursement or mileage for trips, and then also accounts payable information, capturing and routing invoices throughout the organization into various program heads, for example. And so it kind of covers that area, a lot of different areas. Now the slide says Sage here, but it can also work with MIP. The other thing is it can also do some light purchasing. So maybe you have requisition purchase orders that need to be routed and received and three-way matched. You can do some of that functionality as well. And intelligence is smart enough to flag kind of anomalies if there are price differences as things are getting passed through the organization. So I'm going to keep it kind of brief here. I'll show the software in just a moment. But again, if you've got people that have a lot of receipts that they're trying to collect, they're not timely getting them in, you can put settings to say, hey, after 3 days, if they haven't turned them in, or after 7 days, they haven't turned them in, you need to temporarily turn off their corporate card so they can't use it any longer. All of those controls are in place. You can also control what places they can swipe their card at. So it gets quite granular. The OCR technology is very strong, quite accurate, and can read a lot of challenging documents. And there's also a mobile app that people are interested in. So they can snap a picture on their phone. They can either text or code it through the mobile app. And any email receipts that they get, like an Uber, hotels, Amazon purchases, those are going to automatically feed into the platform. So one component is they do encourage using their credit cards. They have a 1.5% cash back. So if you have about $1 million of accounts payable spend or card spend a year, for example, non-payroll expenses, one way to view it in terms of return on investment is try to get a lot of the recurring bills, insurance, utilities, rents, those kinds of things on the card payments, and you just instantly start saving money back. And oftentimes that's enough to cover more than just the software in and of itself. So we see a lot of advantages to that process. But that being said, you're not limited to having to pay everything by credit card. If you want to still pay by ACH or check, paper check, if you've got some vendors that still require that, you're able to do that as well. And they will print and mail out those checks for you on your behalf. So let's kind of toggle here to the software. It is a cloud-based platform, okay? And so in regards to MIP, you would still have your chart of accounts from MIP input into the system. So your same funding source codes, your program codes, your grants, your general ledger accounts, you get your vendor list in here. And so then the coding will match up to your MIP system, and once the transaction is finalized, it can be imported into MIP. There are some reports out here, and I'm going to gloss over those, but kind of just showing, spending by individual, by different card holders, different spending by different departments, and so forth. All of that reporting is out here. But what people are most interested in is kind of the credit card and accounts payable areas. There's a place called Manage Spending, and you can set up different spending policies. So for example, here we've got a card that's issued for just gas purchases only, and they can spend only up to $100 per month, okay? And within that card, I can control what categories they're allowed to spend down to. So maybe this is only for, again, gas purchases. And then I can also restrict and say, well, they need to limit who they can spend the card at. So maybe they can only spend it at Marathon Gas, for example, or at BP or something like that, but they can't spend it at Home Depot for supplies or something like that. And so you can come out and restrict your vendor list and say these are the only ones that they're allowed to go out and spend to, okay? And again, this would come from your list from MIP. So you kind of get some of that set up there in the background. If you have an employee that's terminated and you need to turn off their card, you can do that here. You can also issue a new card for like new employees, or maybe there are multiple purchasing programs that they can spend for. So one card could have multiple categories that are allowed. You can set that up as well. Okay. So you do a little bit of the setup. Where it gets a little bit more interesting is in these expense areas. So receipt collection is often a big pain. No one likes to have to do that. So trying to get it done on the fly and in real time before you have to track down that piece of paper and lose it, that's oftentimes helpful. But out here from an accounting department, I can see all of the credit card transactions flowing through. I can see if managers need to review them, if they've been approved. And within some of these, I can even attach receipts as well. So let me come over here to reimbursements as an example. I can see, for example, there's a receipt on this one here, $16. I can see that David is the one that submitted this. It's still pending at his manager level. I can come into that and see all of his transactions that are outstanding. And then he can code the MIP code. So maybe there's a general ledger code that he needs to hit. Maybe there's a program or a department maybe there's a FASB 117 restriction code and so forth. You have control over what fields are required for them to populate to submit their expense reports. Okay. There's also approvals out here. In this case, there's up to 3 people that can approve this, and I'll show an example of what a workflow looks like there as well. Okay. As an employee, if I need to put in a new request, I can come up here at the top, submit a request, and it's just a matter of dragging and dropping the sheet. The other thing you can do is mileage through here. So some people use company mileage, for example, or they process that through maybe payroll or something like that. The thing we like about this program is maybe I'm traveling and I'm going to go from Columbus to Indianapolis. And as soon as I put in my locations, it'll automatically generate the associated Google Map distance for me and do the calculation as well. And if I need to denote that there's anybody else that traveled with me on that trip, I can put that in as well. Okay. So quite nice information. And again, once these accounting entries are complete, then they can be imported into the MIP payroll system. Traveling, I won't go into this for the sake of time. I know we're coming up short here. But if you want to book flights, if you want to book hotels, rental cars, and so forth for different travel events, you can do that directly through here. It uses a third-party pricing tool, some of the other ones that you're probably familiar with online to find good deals. And if, for example, your policy says you can only travel economy but no upgrades or first class or something like that, when you review the flights, it'll tell you in the list and say, nope, this one's not acceptable for your organization. Okay, so you kind of bake those policies in as well. And then this is probably the main thing people are interested in is the perhaps accounts payable bill automation. And so there's a couple different ways transactions can get in here. I can forward in invoices to via email. I can drag and drop them. I can import them, or I could just key them just like I'm familiar with an MIP or Microi. But for visual purposes here, for example, I've got 3 separate invoices. They're all PDFs. I just release it on the screen. It's going to go ahead and upload those. It's going to read them in real time. At this point, it's using technology to read the vendor, the dollar amount, the due date, the date. It's also checking to see if there was a duplicate. So for example, it said, hey, I think I've seen this bill before. Make sure you're not paying it twice and so forth. And then as a reviewer, I can come out and I can see that invoice attached to that transaction. It read all of the pertinent fields, automatically populated those, read the descriptions, okay? Also started to read the line items. So, you know, I can put in, this one knows, let me go back here. I want to try maybe this one here. Something that's a little bit different is when I see the lightning bolt, then that means that OCR read all of the fields. So it read the descriptions, it read the quantity, it read the price, and so forth, and pulled those in, and I can code each line item. Now, if I don't want to pull in each line item, and I just want to do a summary amount, I can say collapse the lines out here. Then it's just reading the total down here at the bottom and truncates that transaction. Okay. A lot of different payment methods. I can pay by ACH. I can have Ramp mail checks on my behalf, or I could pay with the Ramp card, receive cash back for all of that additional spending. Okay. And one other thing here is down here at the bottom, again, I can see the approvals and workflows. I'll go into an editor screen out here, and just real briefly, we'll show that. Quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how I can set up approval processes, but the UI is quite intuitive as well. So this concept is true both for AP, it's true for credit card transactions, it's true for the other things that you can process through here, but this is kind of a visual of where I can say, you know, if things are greater than certain dollar amounts, go to these folks. who's responsible for the vendor, go to this person. If it's over 15,000, it needs to go to the finance department, and I can kind of spell those steps out. And it can get pretty, complicated if you've worked with Microwave, for example, or other systems. And the other thing I like is when you're setting up the system, you can also use sample transactions. So I could come out and say, okay, if I put in a $20,000 bill and I want to pay it by check, and this person's going to be the one submitting it, it'll go through and say, is it going to pass or fail? And it will test that transaction. It says, nope, it stopped at this step. And so there's something else I need to complete in the setup in order for it to be approved. Okay. There's just a lot of things you can do out here. The last thing I'll kind of end with is this solution also has what are called a vendor portal. So if you need to onboard new vendors, make sure that their W-9 is included. You want to send them an email saying, hey, we prefer to pay you electronically. We need you to put in your bank account information and that type of thing. You can initiate that through this platform. They get an email and fill it out, and then you're not having to manually collect and key in all that information. So we've just found it to be a real workhorse, and wanted to highlight that. If you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to myself or Luke. And with that, I'll pass it back to wrap it up.
All right, everybody. I know we're a couple minutes over here, but let me flip back to my screen and we'll close it out. So we really appreciate everybody hanging on and attending our Lunch and Learn for the fall here today. So like Adam said, RAMP might have sparked more than a couple questions. It's a new area that we have seen lots of interest in. So if anything, you have questions over what he showed, or you even want to see a more thorough demo, we're happy to do that. Same with Sage Intacct, as I showed a little bit earlier. Any questions related to the material in between, whether it be your own system review or the budget, reach out to Adam or myself, email, or give us a call. Again, thank you everybody for attending, and hope to see you here in the future. Thanks.